liberty, and justice for.
Let's speak to Michael Johns, who served as a White House speechwriter for President George Herbert Walker Bush. He joins us from Philadelphia. Michael, good to see you. Where do you think it's gone wrong for Donald Trump? I mean, look, granted, he's won so many votes, but he still has not won the election. So what made the difference between winning and losing, do you think?
Well, firstly, I agree with the president that this election, as difficult as it is to fathom this when you have media declaring Biden the victor, is not necessarily over. There are very legitimate challenges in what continues to be an extremely close race. Media, of course, don't declare the president of the United States. That's declared on December 14th by the Electoral College. So there's ample time between now and then to address the issues of contention as it relates to some of these voting discrepancies and some allegations of fraud. You know, and by the way, these are being described as unsubstantiated or not concrete or not verified. You know, in the case of Nevada, for instance, we have already identified over 3,000 individuals who voted in Clark County region of that state who were not registered there. That's been sent as a criminal referral to the Department of Justice. There's a number of federal court motions that have been filed contending what appear to be aberrations in vote counting processes and in access to poll watchers, which are legally permitted in almost every state in the country. And so legitimate issues. And if you go down and look sort of at the 7 key battleground states or so, you know, they're really all within, 35,000 or under votes for the most part. So will the president be reelected? Depends on how this is all resolved, but it would be an error to say that this is absolutely concrete, resolved. And those individuals in the streets of D.C. right now, don't represent the thinking of 70.6 million Americans who turned out to vote for President Trump and shouldn't be depicted as representing them.
Well, some of the accusations that Trump has made, he has said that they're all happening in states that are controlled by the Democrats. And that's not totally true, because some of the problems that he has are also in states that are controlled by Republicans or have Republican governors. And in terms of if there are going to be complaints from the Trump campaign, surely there could also be then counterclaims by the Biden campaign, because obviously if you've got people voting outside of the district where they're actually registered, that's not allowed in the United States. But it surely can't be and won't be the case that it would only be Democratic Party supporters who voted outside their assigned district. It surely will have happened the other way, just because so many hundreds of millions of people voted. There are going to be mistakes.
Right, those are all very legitimate and accurate points. There's, for instance, if we had this 3,000 number in Nevada, which could grow in the coming days, I'm not suggesting that those were all votes for Joe Biden. Maybe they weren't. Maybe they were votes for Trump. Maybe at the end of the day, that's thrown out and the president ends up with less votes in Nevada. That's entirely possible, to be realistic and intellectually honest about it. But it's also untrue to sort of say that there's no substance to these claims. Unfortunately, you're not going to get that in a tweet from the president or in his brief remarks, but in the filed legal complaints that some of which already have been filed and many of which will be filed on Monday, you will see the actual substance of those allegations, some of which has already been reported on. These are not frivolous matters. They're not indicative of a man who's just trying to cling on to this job. He didn't need this job. It's been, I'm sure, a great headache in a lot of ways for 4 years. But it is important to our system to make sure that, every legitimate vote is counted and every non-legitimate vote is discounted.
Are you as disappointed as Eric Trump and Donald Trump Jr., 2 of Donald Trump's sons, with the lack of support that they allege Republicans are not giving President Trump at this moment?
Yeah, I think Donald Jr. and Eric have a legitimate point. I mean, the Republican Party has not really had, especially before Trump, a reputation for really fighting back hard or for standing up on things. The easiest thing to do politically, of course, especially when you might be on a losing side, is to, just sort of hide from everything. I do think they have a point. It's important that Republicans stand up and ensure that this vote count is authentic and that we have, an accurate counting of all legitimate votes. So, and some Republicans are doing that, in fairness, and maybe they sparked a little bit of action in calling for it. I'd like to see more of them doing it. And importantly, pointing out, which we can tend to forget, kind of high school level government civics about how our presidential process works, that it's ultimately the Electoral College, December 14th, that'll make this judgment. And, what any U.S. media outlet's saying about the outcome is very interesting, it's relevant, but it's not definitive, and it has no legal standing or bearing.
Whether he is in the White House or not on the 20th of January, Michael, something has been born over the past 4 years. Where will Trumpism go after the first term of President Trump, if there is a second term, is still, from your point of view, to be decided? But what about Trumpism as a political philosophy and what it's brought to America, and how people the millions who have voted for him will be feeling?
Look, I think Donald Trump has saved the Republican Party, and I speak as someone who, started out, through Reagan and Bush, and my own views have evolved over time, and I was a day one endorser of Donald Trump. I think his insight in identifying the issues on trade, on the threat to the United States and the world from China, and on our open border and immigration issues, these were themes that were not receiving really any adequate degree of attention from the Republican Party before his arrival. So I think he's had the back of the working men and women of our country, and particularly of blue-collar voters. I think he's made the party more populist, ultimately more popular, and whether he prevails or, in worst case, does not, I do think he's been a transformational figure in defining 21st century Republican Party in a way that ultimately is going to make it more successful and more appealing to voters.
Michael Johns, really appreciate it. Thank you so much indeed.